Hi everybody, welcome back to the Content Team channel. For those of you who are new here, I'm Victoria, the Editor-in-Chief of Content Team's English department. Alright, so this is the next installation in my emotional SEO series. Specifically, this is part 3. In part 1, I went over what emotional SEO is, and I went over the emotion wheel explaining anticipation, joy, and trust, and giving some examples of how to encourage each feeling. Okay, and in part 2, I went over 4 emotional triggers, which are guilt, trust, belonging, and exclusivity, and I gave examples of some companies that really have those down pat. So if you haven't seen those 2 parts, I recommend watching them before watching this part because it's going to give you that context that you really need. All right, but this part is how to create a selling story from start to finish. And so if you watch the previous 2 videos, you understand what kind of words to use to trigger these emotions. But now we're going to kind of just put it together, and I'm going to show you how to make a story that sells. Over on the Content Team website, I've published an article about the art of storytelling and how it can be relevant to pretty much any B2C company or B2B as well. Okay, and if you've watched my previous videos, you know what kind of language and trigger words to use to inspire different emotions. But there's something else to keep in mind: the believability of the story. Okay, consumers are used to companies, marketing departments kind of trying to tug in their heartstrings and play with their emotions. And if your story isn't genuine, they will recognize that and they will turn on you in a heartbeat. So as an example, do you remember that Kendall Jenner Pepsi advertisement from a few years back? Maybe it was a couple, I don't remember the exact year, but essentially there's a protest going on and the cops and the protesters are kind of facing off against each other. And Kendall Jenner just like swoops right in and saves the day by giving one of the cops a can of Pepsi, right? And afterwards the crowd cheers, the cops are happy, everyone's happy, you know, she saved the day. Well, when this ad went live, it was total chaos and Pepsi's reputation just tanked. Because in the real world, when the ad went live, there were so many protests going on, and this was amidst a horrible police brutality. And this advertisement, it seemed like Pepsi was just trivializing real world issues and then also exploiting the BLM movement to sell soda. And yeah, they took the advertisement down right away, but it just, so many people were angry, and then some were angry, some thought it was funny, but no one liked it, right? I don't think there was a single person who was like, you know what, this is a great advertisement, what a good story. Right? Now that we've looked at a really horrible example, let's take a look at when storytelling was done right. In April of 2020, just as COVID was really beginning to wreak havoc everywhere across the globe, Apple released their Creativity Goes On ad campaign. And this is kind of a digital story that showed its audience the ways that people could, stay connected and support each other even through social distancing and a pandemic. And it was incredibly relevant to current events while still remaining respectful, right? It didn't diminish real world problems, and it tugged on the heartstrings without coming across as manipulative. Was it manipulative? Yes, but all marketing manipulates its audience. The key is you just don't want to come across as manipulative to the consumers. Okay, now step 2. After you've chosen a story that is relevant and genuine and isn't condescending or trivializing, it's time to check its elements. Every story, or every great story at least, has 4 main elements. There's the human, a goal, resistance, and a truth. Okay, the first one is the human. Well, perhaps it's better to say soul, because there are plenty of stories that feature an animal or even an inanimate object, but all of them have a soul. They're self-aware, they can think, even if, the little toaster that could. It's a talking toaster that has feelings, right? These feelings inside this human or animal or object is what forms a connection point to the audience. The next step is, or the next element rather, is the goal. This can be a conscious or subconscious desire that propels the soul through the story. And the third one is resistance. It's a huge obstacle that is keeping them from reaching the goal. So the bigger and more relatable the obstacle is, the better the story will be. And then lastly, there's truth, right? It's what you believe in and what you want the viewer or reader to believe in as well when they're finished reading the content. And, this is a good opportunity for you to show them your truth or why your product or service will help the human overcome the obstacle and reach their goal. And that example that I gave of Apple's creativity campaign works really well here. So we have the human, which is everyone collectively, right? We have tons of humans who are, going through the pandemic, and their goal is connection and support and to communicate with their loved ones. The resistance is very obvious. The pandemic, social distancing, you have to stay apart from each other. The truth is twofold. The first truth, the marketing version, is that with Apple products, you can stay in contact with other people and still have that emotional intimacy that you crave. The second kind of deeper message that you want an advertisement to have, you want it to go beyond just the salesy element, is that communication is vital to our happiness and mental health, and it's not something that should be ignored even during a pandemic. Okay, now the third step to creating a selling story is to form an emotional arc. Okay, this is the last step that I'm going to talk about today. The best stories aren't one note, they aren't flat. They have a full arc, and so should your content. Take, for instance, the fairy tale of Cinderella. She starts at a really low point. She's a servant to her own family. She's horribly mistreated. She's dressed in rags, right? She's at an all-time low. Then her fairy godmother shows up, and things start to go upwards, right? She sees the prince. It goes a little higher. They start dancing. Oh, it's at a pinnacle. But then the clock strikes midnight. It shoots back down. That's not the end. The next day, Prince Charming shows up with a glass slipper. They're reunited, and the arc shoots back up as they get their happily ever after. And this is known as the rise, fall, rise emotional or character arc. There are some other arcs as well. There's Man in a Hole, which is fall, rise. There's Oedipus, which is fall, rise, fall. Probably not what you want in your content. And there's Rags to Riches is another really common one, which is just straight up, so on and so forth. So you want this emotional arc not only in your stories, but also when creating content about your company, such as your about page. This is really important. If your about page and content makes it seem like your company has never gone through hard times, and it implies that your team is led by incredibly lucky business people, it's unbelievable. Even if you are the luckiest person in the world, you're gonna have some vulnerabilities, and that's what you need to highlight. And then if your campaigns are told through, data points rather than plot points, it's really boring. So instead of throwing statistics and numbers at your readers, you're going to want to show plot points in time. Cinderella was mistreated. Cinderella went to the ball. Cinderella found her Prince Charming. Not Cinderella had a 25% chance of blah, 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 blah. That's not a good story. All right, so I hope this helped. I hope that now you kind of have a better idea of how to just create a good story. And if you have any questions at all, please let me know. I will do my best to address them. Bye.